Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. It's been a minute, but we're finally back. And oddly enough, not a lot has happened given the amount of time that we've been gone. I think it's been 2 weeks since the last time we recorded, and we have, I guess, 3 signings and 1 trade to go over, and plus we got some Baseball Hall of Fame stuff as well.
Yeah, it is that time of year where deals are flowing, and the ballot is starting to, get some get a little bit of traction. There's some ballots that have fluttered in, some fun ones, some not so fun ones. But we're here for all of it. So the first deal to get into, the biggest deal, especially to me, I felt like this was going to be a good sign for whoever, signed this guy. Sonny Gray signs a 3-year, $75 million deal with the St. Louis Cardinals. What did you think about this move?
It was definitely a necessary move for the Cardinals. I mean, if they're trying to compete next year in a division that might not be the strongest, needed a starting pitcher that they can sort of depend on for next year. Because, I mean, if you look at it right now, when you took out Sonny Gray from that rotation, it was Miles Mikolas, it was Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, Steven Matz, and then I think Ryan or Zach Thompson was the fifth. So, I mean, they needed someone to lead the rotation, and Sonny Gray is exactly that guy. They signed him. I'm pretty surprised. The Cardinals didn't really seem to do this very often in the past, but they gave him a pretty good chunk of AAV money, 3 years and $5 million a year, I believe it was. But it's also very backloaded. They're giving him $10 million next year, $25 million in 2025, and then $35 million in 2026, which will be his age 36 season.
Right. And yeah, it's something that we kind of talked about of why it would have made sense for the potentially the Cardinals or the Cubs. Was it wasn't going to be a break the bank move. It wasn't going to be a long-term move. And that's exactly what it is. And, I guess it's break the bank per year. It's $25 million per year. But ultimately, it's an investment for the next 3 years. And why I liked this Gray deal is, I'm not projecting him to be, a Cy Young finalist for all 3 of these years, but he does have a track record, going back to the start of the second half in 2022. So this is a 1.5-year sample. He has a 2.69 ERA and 2.94 FIP. And out of 45 qualifiers in that span, that ERA ranks second and FIP ranks third over a 1.5-year sample. So, he's built quite the track record, very, very sneakily under the radar.
Yeah, no, he absolutely has. And I love what the Cardinals are doing with this contract, with backloading it specifically, because you only have to give him $10 million next year, and then after 2024, Paul Goldschmidt's money is off the books. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him or not, but if they do, they're probably not going to be paying him $26 million a year unless he comes back to MVP form this season, in which case I don't think they'd re-sign him. But, that money would come off the books. They would have a $12 million option for Kyle Gibson and a $12 million option for Lance Lynn, both coming off the books. They'd also have, if they don't take it, a $6.5 million option for Giovanni Gallegos coming off the books. The only person they have hitting free agency is Tyler O'Neill, which, unless he returns to 2021 form this year, probably won't be getting a large chunk. I mean, he definitely won't be getting a lot in arbitration, but that's when they start paying him $25 million a year, and then even then, $35 million a year in 2026. After that, you have $17 million of Miles Mikolas' money coming off the books and $12.5 million for Steven Matz. And not only that, but Nolan Arenado's contract is getting, they're paying him less and less every year. With the end of that contract coming up, he gets paid $35 million in 2024, $32 million in 2025, and then 27, and then 15, and then he's a free agent. So the fact that they're giving the largest chunk of money to Sonny Gray at the back of that deal, it kind of makes sense because he's a guy that you could very much see aging well. And it makes it easier for them to spend potentially further this year.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'm trying to think of the last time this rotation really had a true number one. And
2021 Adam Wainwright, I guess.
like 2021 Adam Wainwright, but he probably wouldn't be that true number one if not for the defense behind him. And I think it might go back to even like 2019 Jack Flaherty is like the last time you felt really that confident in a Cardinals starting pitcher, if you're not including Wainwright in that, of course. But yeah, like, I think this will be big for the Cardinals. I think there are a lot of people who wish they went after another guy of Gray's caliber as well. Not that it's too late, but they've kind of filled up that rotation a little bit. And it seems unlikely that they would go after another big name. But getting, it's definitely a step in the right direction for the Cardinals, who their starting pitching was a huge glaring weakness last year.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge glaring weakness on it, and like when we say that, I mean like it's pretty much the exclusive reason they were a last place team. I mean, I know that Arnado and Goldschmidt both did regress healthy. The bullpen was shaky because the rotation, left them out to dry so many times. It's good to have a number one. I still think the rotation is too many question marks right now for me to confidently put them as a playoff contender. But it's definitely a lot better with Sonny Gray, and Sonny Gray is a guy that can make any rotation better. But it's a move that needed to be made for St. Louis.
Yeah, absolutely. Just breaking down what that starting rotation did. I have to get the positional split here on Fangraphs, but yeah, the St. Louis starting rotation, or at least starters in general, whoever started the game, whether it was an opener or a guy who went 9 innings, they had the fifth worst ERA in baseball with a 5.08 ERA, and they had the ninth worst FIP at a 4.61 FIP. So and it's not even like it was a bunch of really high profile pitchers that were underperforming. It was like it just seemed like it was bound to happen at some point with the arms they were throwing out there. You got like 41-year-old Adam Wainwright going out there. You got Jake Woodford. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen. And it kind of crashed and burned. And I think the Cardinals are kind of acknowledging that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most obvious needs that any team in Major League Baseball had, given the performances of last season, and also the prospects of this coming season as well. Because it's not really like, I mean, I guess Tink Hence is pretty cool, but that's a Cardinals prospect that probably won't even be in the majors next year.
Yeah, especially considering that especially considering like this is a high profile team that the teams that were worse than them in starter ERA were the Rockies, Athletics, Reds, and Royals. Teams that were not expected to do well last year, whereas the Cardinals were an obvious division contender, I think division favorite last year. So yeah, I think they really needed to acknowledge that. It's good that they did, but I think there is definitely outside of Gray, there's definitely an argument to be made that they should have went in a different direction in with some of their acquisitions.
Yeah, the Gibson and Lynn for $24 million is kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean, they will have their innings, but the quality of those innings will be in question for sure. But Kyle Gibson did win 15 games last year, so there is that.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's all you need. Did he have one of the best offenses in baseball behind him? Yeah, but you know what? That's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Anything more on the Sonny Gray deal?
Yeah, I mean, congrats to you for correctly predicting this one. I didn't know if the Cardinals were going to be willing to hand out the money, but they did, and I'm glad they did.
Yeah, I think I'm one for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 out of the people that have signed so far.
More than
which
me.
is which is all right. So hopefully more in the making. I mean, whenever Ohtani signs, that'll boost our percentage up, hopefully.
Hopefully. I mean, it seems like what the Cubs, the Blue Jays are in right now, as well as the Dodgers, maybe the Giants.
Yeah, I know there was like a passing report saying that like the Red Sox and a couple other teams were already like kind of looking in other directions right now, which is fine. Um,
Mm.
but excuse me. Um, another acquisition. Do we want to get into Kenta Maeda?
Yeah, that's another one, another good acquisition in the starting rotation made by a team that needed pitching.
Yes. And a team that the Tigers are kind of sort of emerging a little bit. I don't know. They're doing the same thing they did 2 years ago. They finished off the year pretty well. They ended up finishing second in the AL Central. I think like in the month of September they were like 18-10 or something like that, or they finished 18-10, something
Hmm.
like that. But
Yeah.
when they're in an obviously weak division right now. And they went out and signed Kenta Maeda to a 2-year, $24 million deal. He came back from Tommy John surgery last year. He threw 104 innings, had a 4.23 ERA, and an expected ERA under 4. What did you think of this signing for the Tigers?
I really like it for the reason of Kenta Maeda is a guy that uh, can keep the ball in the yard. I think he'll do a good job of that, and I think he'll obviously be in a good ballpark to be able to do that. Obviously the Tigers needed, I'd say, a pitcher. It's probably not their biggest need, but I think the rotation looks a lot better with Maeda in it. It's innings, obviously. Uh, um, and yeah, I mean, 10.1 strikeouts per nine last year and over 100 innings. Um, and I really like the idea of him pitching in that ballpark half the time. But more importantly, I mean, I really like how he meshes with the rest of that rotation because it really feels like Tigers have five, maybe six guys that you can like say is going to be in their rotation next year, or at least you don't feel awful about them making a start. Where it's Tarek Skubal, who is like a sleeper ace in Major League Baseball, I would say. Maeda slides in nicely as a two, and then there's a lot of potential and unknown. Let's see what we got with Matt Manning, Reese Olson, Casey Mize, Sawyer Gibson Long. There's a ceiling and a floor, and I think they're very far apart. But Maeda adds a little bit of stability to that.
Right, for sure. And adds a veteran presence, as cheesy as sometimes that may sound, but uh
Mm-hmm.
he does add that. He's been in the league for a good while. Um and yeah, it's a matter of whether he's keeping the ball in the yard or not. His strikeout minus walk rate was pretty phenomenal. It was over 20%, I believe. And out of 127 pitchers to throw 100 innings last year, that strikeout minus walk rate ranked 15th in top like 12-ish% in strikeout minus walk rate. Coming off Tommy John surgery, very, very impressive. So getting him on $12 million a year, like, it's low risk. I think it can bring a solid reward. He hasn't really ever had like a disaster year, it seems like. Sometimes it seems like the a lot of years they were trying to figure out what his role was and trying to figure out if he would be healthy enough. So if he can have a consistent role, I think I think there's a lot of positives that can be brought to the Tigers here.
Yeah. And I mean, it's obviously not their biggest need. They need a bat. I don't know who it's going to be, but they can't. I don't think they can go into this season with the offense they have now. I think there should be one more bat. It's not the end of the world, but there's a lot of guys that are, I think, more potential than actual guys that you can depend upon. We need Riley Green to take a step up, but he also just got Tommy John surgery. We need Spencer Torkelson to be a little more consistent. He did just hit 30 home runs, but great numbers to increase. We need Terry Carpenter to do that again. Mark Canna to adjust nicely, which I think he could. Javier Baez needs to, step up and be the player that they signed him to for that contract. That's a lot of they need this, but we don't really know if they're going to get it. So, I mean, I think they need one stable bat in that lineup, and I don't know where it's going to come from, but that's the last thing that I think they really need. And I think people are really going to start looking at this Tigers team as the biggest sleeper team in the league, probably.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think you bring up a good point with the bat with the lack of bats is this team had a team OPS plus of 87, and that's park adjusted. So that accounts for the fact that they play at a pitcher's ballpark. So a team OPS plus of 87. I don't know how many playoff teams have, gone into the playoffs with a team OPS plus of 87. I'd say, slim to none.
Yeah, and even that's like, yeah, and that's in a second place season. Like, imagine if they had a 95.
Yeah. So, I think that's going to be their biggest roadblock is their lineup. And the trouble is, if the Tigers, no matter how gung-ho the Tigers are going to be this offseason, there just simply aren't a lot of good bats in the market this year, or at least elite bats that are really going to turn your team around. So, that's going to be a little bit of a roadblock they run into, but hopefully they can sort of build small and hope for growth from a lot of their, young roster.
Yeah. Who do they have anyone coming up next year? Because they drafted a high schooler last year, so I can't imagine there's like
Yeah.
I guess Jace Jung is their number one prospect, right? I don't know if he's coming up next year though. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
Max
not
Clark
sure.
is certainly not going to be on the roster next year because he was playing in high school last year. I don't know. Can we possibly say Jace Jung is there? What level did he play at last year? Colt Keith is another one. I guess Colt Keith could be there at third base. But even then, that's a guy that's got to, adjust the majors in 1 year.
Yeah, I'd say the Tigers are a team where like any other division, you're not really looking out for them too much. But because they're in the Central, it's like, all right, there's a chance for like literally everyone here, except for the White Sox and the Royals. But yeah, there's a good shot for them. And they have a lot of with how young the roster is, they have a lot of room for growth.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. And there's, there's a couple guys down there. Like I mentioned, Jace Jung, Colt Keith. Those are like the two major uh, bats that they have in the minor leagues that we could see next year. So there's potential for that as well. But yeah, I do think one more bat and this team is serious.
Yes, yeah, definitely something to look out for. The last thing I'll mention with Kenta Maeda when I was looking at him, kind of an odd trend for batted ball data, and it's almost kind of an anomaly. So I don't think this will happen again. But from 2021 to 2023, his ground ball rate dropped 6.4 percentage points, and his fly ball rate increased 8.3 percentage points. And his pop up rate decreased, and his line drive rate increased. So nothing good there. But I imagine like that'll even itself out, considering for all of his career he had a ground ball rate of at least 40%, and last year was 33.6%. So I feel like that's something to maybe look at positively, because it seems so out of left field that I just don't see that really happening again.
That's crazy because he threw 104 innings. A 33% ground ball rate should not be sustainable for that long, no matter who you are as a pitcher.
Yeah, unless you're Christian Javier.
Unless you're Christian Javier, yeah, that's the only one.
But yeah, anything more on the Maeda deal?
No, I think we kind of said what we thought.
So that leads into a trade that kind of had us maybe scratching our heads a little bit. Nothing like shocking, but we were like, this is pretty interesting. But Eugenio Suarez was traded by the Mariners over to where was he traded to again?
Arizona.
For a reliever and like kind of a prospect?
Sebi Zavala and a reliever. I don't remember the guy's name.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on the Mariners dishing him off?
I mean, I'll start by saying I love this trade for Arizona. But of course, there's another team at the other end of that deal that I don't love the trade for, and that obviously would be the Seattle Mariners. We talked about this team 2 weeks ago on the free agent show, Chris, and our consensus was they need a bat. I mean, they were supposed to be a championship contender in 2023, and they missed the playoffs entirely, which is not good. You can't have that. You really cannot have that. And I know that Eugenio Suarez strikes out a lot, all really hard, and that's kind of exactly what they need. And they just lost a guy that can do that. He also had 11 outs above average last year. Uh, and it sounds like, and they also had just signed Luis Arias beforehand, and reports have said that they plan on playing him at third base, which is, I think, a pretty significant downgrade. Eugenio Suarez was only owed $11 million for the next year, and Luis Arias is going into arbitration projected to make around 4.7 million. So if that holds up, and obviously it's not going to be exact, but the Mariners are saving about $7 million to get rid of one of their better bats, and create another positional need essentially, because I don't think Luis Arias is going to be a productive everyday third baseman for that team.
Right, for sure. And I think part of this is the maybe like Jerry DePoto type like consistent retooling of a team, like never going full like buy or sell necessarily, but just trying to make what he feels is best for the team. And I guess odds are, so Eugenio Suarez was coming up on a kind of a contract year. There was a team option after that I'm not sure that obviously the Mariners didn't really plan on picking up, I guess. So essentially he was going into a contract year, and I think just DePoto saw it and was like, well, we're not going to be re-signing him anytime soon. We could potentially just trade him off. And I feel like I'm going to wait to judge this trade until we see what the Mariners do in free agency. Because if they go out and they, have duds on the free agent market and don't sign anyone big, offensively, then this looks like a very, very, very bad trade. But if they are able to go out and get, two, three impactful bats, then it's like, okay, I kind of see what they were doing. Like they were trying to get some value out of Suarez, but keeping their lineup sort of, with getting these extra acquisitions, keeping their lineup pretty good. But if they don't go out and do that, then this doesn't look like a very good move.
So I think that this was a John Stanton move and not a Jerry DePoto move. John Stanton is the principal owner of the Mariners, and Jerry DePoto, of course, is the GM. And it looked like the only really real reason they made this move was to save money, because if they were trading him on the basis of like actually trying to get a return, I think they could have done a lot better than Carlos Vargas and Sebi Zavala, even if it was for 1 year. But the Diamondbacks, their biggest positional need from an offensive standpoint was the third baseman. Evan Longoria was all right last year, but he's a free agent now. I don't know if they want Emmanuel Rivera there, because they kind of use him as a defensive replacement more during the playoffs. So it crosses up a big need for them. Suarez is a guy that hits a lot of fly balls, and he actually had better expected numbers than on the surface numbers last year. And all the reports, like I mentioned, I think Rosenthal reported that they plan on playing Luis Arias every day at third base, and he slugged under 300 last year. So you're getting that slugged under 300, which is I don't think what Mariner fans want to see. As of right now, their bottom four in their projected lineup is Cade Marlowe, Luis Arias, Dominic Canzone, and Josh Rojas. So they're definitely going to need to pick it up in free agency. And it does sound like Blake Snell is like begging to go there. So maybe you sign Blake Snell, you trade Logan Gilbert for some bats. Maybe that's the move. Maybe you trade Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, whatever you can, to eventually have the Snell, Castillo, Robbie Ray, Kirby, and someone else rotation.
Yeah, maybe that Kirby for Soto 1-for-1 will happen, like we talked about off air one time.
Yes. Yeah.
But
yeah, the Soto for Kirby 1-for-1.
Yeah, my Mike Petriello off air was not into that trade from the Padres
Understandable.
perspective, which I get,
Understandable.
but the guy Kirby has way more control. I'm not saying Kirby's a better player, but there's a little
Oh, he's
something
not at
there.
all.
Yeah. Um. So anything more on the Suarez trade?
Dude, 19 walks in 190 and two-thirds innings is nuts.
It really is.
No, but still, 19 walks in 190 and two-thirds innings is absurd. It is ridiculous. It's an extremely lame move from the Mariners. I really wish, a team that was trying to make it to the postseason would act like it. I mean, obviously, yeah, this could be a wait and see type of move, but they're saving $7 million. I don't know how much they could do with that additional 7 mil. You know what I mean? Like, if they get Blake Snell, would they have not been able to do that if they had $7 million less? I don't think it's gonna come down to that, especially because Blake Snell is, if they even get him, if they're even interested in him, that's not even the biggest need. You just filled up another hole, or you just created another hole rather in your offense, which is more work that needs to be done because you wanted to save that money.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, but I love it. I
I'm
love it for
looking.
Arizona though. I mean, that's a team that made it to the World Series last year and is getting better.
Yeah, I'm wondering what the long-term implications are for Seattle. And yeah, from Arizona's perspective, like, often, despite all their success in the postseason last year, they were outscored in the regular season, I believe, and they had an OPS plus below 100. So getting a bat will help them out. And I know excuse me, I know Suarez was a little bit underwhelming last year, but in 2022 he did have a 129 OPS plus. So there is that major potential there. Major extra base hit potential. And it didn't appear that the Diamondbacks really traded much that was valuable for him. So overall, pretty solid deal for Arizona. And
Yeah.
yeah, the last deal to get into, Luis Severino going across town to the Mets. What did you think about this one?
I mean, Luis Severino, I think this kind of offseason was always viewed as like which team is going to try to fix him type of player, which is why I had him going to the Dodgers. I thought it would fill a hole and it would also give them a lot of, something to work with and a lot of potential because Severino was a Cy Young candidate every year before he, started getting hurt in 2019, I believe. And last year was unfortunately like particularly bad, but uh I mean, he's only 30 years old. I feel like there's still some sort of reason to believe there can be something there. um but I mean, he's going to the Mets now. And I feel like he's going to be a good test for David Stearns and the baseball operations department to see what they can come up with because it is a new regime in the baseball ops department. um and to have a guy that has that kind of potential that you can, that has potential to become a success story, it would be a good first test.
Yeah, it would be pretty interesting. I think what's most alarming about what Severino did last year was the change in strikeout rate. He was consistently upper 20s throughout his career, but last year his strikeout rate was 18.2%, I believe, and the whiff rate, I'm trying to figure out here. The whiff rate went from 27.8% in 2022 to 20.6% last year, a 7.2 percentage point difference. So I think that's kind of the most alarming thing. He still has the regular Luis Severino velocity. I'm trying to figure out what his pitch movement is looking like, but it's kind of hard to judge that. But I think the stuff's sort of still there, so it'll be interesting to see if the Mets, under this new sort of general management, new baseball operations department, can sort of retool him and create him into the old Luis Severino.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of his problems lie specifically with his four seam fastball, which was I mean, that was his bread and butter pitch back in 2017 to 18. It's not exactly as fast as it used to be. Last year, it averaged 96.5 miles an hour, and before that, it was around 97.5. Which it is only a mile per hour difference, but I mean, batters hit 353 against it last year. They slugged 688. And I mean, the expected slugging was 100 points lower, which is, I guess, encouraging, but uh, you it certainly does cause some questions and some cause for concern when that pitch isn't working. And I wonder if they maybe change up his arsenal. He's very, very in few scenarios thrown a sinker before. He introduced his sinker in 2022, threw it 17 times, only 13 of them to 13 of them to righties and 4 to lefties. And last year he threw it 45 times, but 43 were to righties and only 2 were to lefties. So, it's pretty clear he doesn't have much confidence in it if he's not throwing it to lefties at all. He also has a cutter. So maybe there's a switch in primary fastball usage, or maybe they fixed up his four-seamer. But there certainly is some kind of potential there.
Right, right. Looking at like the movement, it just looks like his pitches moved a little bit less last year than normal. So maybe there's something to look at there. But yeah, it's we knew that this deal was going to be the ultimate I can fix him deal, because we know what he looked like in the late 2010s and even early 2020s when he was healthy. But last year was that was not the Luis Severino we had come to know. So, and he's still, he's, how old is he? Like 30, 31?
30, yeah, he's going into his age 30 season.
Yeah, he's 30. Like, he's still pretty young for a pitcher, to put it frankly. So yeah, there's definitely potential there. It's an I can fix him deal, and I guess the Mets are trying to be the fixers.
Yeah. Another interesting note, his from 2017 to 18, his fly ball rate was 18.4% in 2017, 19.6% in 20 or sorry, it was 18.4% in 2017, 19.6% in 2018. And in every year since then that he's pitched in, which is 19, 21, 22, and 23, the lowest his fly ball rate has been is 24.5%. So, I mean, that could be where that sinker comes in. He gets the ball on the ground a little bit more, keeps it out of the air. I think that's something that would, pretty clearly make him better, especially because a lot of his issues last year were home run related. I mean, he gave up 15 home runs alone on his four-seamer in just 739 total pitches, which is not the best ratio, especially because he only had 38 strikeouts with it as well. That's not very good. But yeah, I mean, there's potential, and I think it comes with the pitch mix.
Yeah, for sure. And last thing I'll say on it is the fly ball rate increasing is coming at the cost of his ground ball rate, and it's not coming with like more pop-ups. Usually a guy with a higher fly ball rate is going to have a higher pop-up rate, but when Severino's fly ball rate went up, his pop-up rate did not. So, that created more, less potential for outs when the ball was in the air. So, yeah, so it, not the best trend to go into. Anything more on the Severino signing?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, he's going to the crosstown rival, which is fun, and it would be interesting to see if the Mets can fix what their other, their New York American League counterparts couldn't.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think those are all the signings we have. And now we get into Hall of Fame talk. Is Daniel's favorite time of year, or favorite time of the offseason, I guess. But this does take most of the offseason. So yeah, we're talking about technically the 2024 Hall of Fame ballot. The ballot dropped. What were your thoughts on the names added?
November 20th. I mean, this is the year that I've been waiting for quite a while. There's three to five first-year players on this ballot that I think have spanning from a chance to get in to a chance of staying on the ballot and being an interesting talking point over the years. And there's a lot of things on this ballot, not even just the first years, but there's 2 returners that are up to go in next year. And there's a chance we have some significant guys falling off the ballot, whether because they don't get 5%, because they get in, and making a lot of room for next year. So I decided to give a 5 Hall of Fame hot takes, and these are predictions that I have about how this process will go and some takeaways that we'll have onward. So I'll get into my first prediction, which was uh, Carlos Beltran will have the highest year-to-year gain of any returning candidate. So Carlos Beltran debuted on the ballot last year. He got, I believe, 46.5% of the vote, which is a really good starting spot because that is over halfway. 37.5% is the halfway mark between 0 and 75%, which is what you need to get in. And for most for most people on this ballot, for guys that don't get in their first year, this is a game of changing people's minds. And it's kind of weird because it's not like Carlos Beltran can really do anything to change people's minds. His career already happened. And I know that there's, some kind of speculation with the Astros scandal. I really don't think it's going to play that big of a factor this year, or in any year. But my general consensus on year-to-year gains and losses is that this is not going to be a very big year for really anyone. Last year we had, it was the first ballot with Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Kurt Schilling, Sammy Sosa, and David Ortiz all being removed from the ballot. Ortiz got in, the other 4, had fallen off. And, with that, the only significant first-year candidate was Beltran, so a lot of attention went to returning candidates. Todd Helton got 20% of the vote, or 20% gain, sorry. Andrew Jones got a 17% gain, Billy Wagner got a 17% gain, and Gary Sheffield got a 15% gain. 4 guys going up by that much is huge. I don't think anyone goes up by 15% this year, but I think Carlos Beltran's going to go up by like maybe 13-ish%. I think he gets close to 60% this year. I think it's a game of changing people's minds, and Carlos Beltran kind of starts that game now because 46% of people already initially have said, yeah, I'm already voting for him. He also does interestingly already have 1 drop this year, and it's not even from a guy that put in a 10-person ballot. So maybe this one's aging poorly already. But I think Carlos Beltran is going to change the most people's minds out of everyone this year.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. Carlos Beltran's Hall of Fame case is very interesting, or at least from a national perspective, because obviously we both think he should be a Hall of Famer, and the Astros scandal shouldn't really be put against him because it was a much bigger operation than just Carlos Beltran, obviously. His career also wasn't really benefited at all. Like, career stats was not benefited at all by that scandal.
No. It was his worst year. It was statistically his worst year.
Yeah,
which is fine because he was like 41 that year. Like, there's no reason he should have been better than any other point in his career at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think, with the scandal, like PEDs a little bit, like, time just helps, and people kind of like are able to take a little bit of a step back with the thing and give him some time. But I think also part of why he, it wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer necessarily was, there are some like maybe traditional marks that he just didn't get to, like the 3,000 hits or 500 home runs, although he had, 2,700 or something like that. And, over 400 home runs, I believe. So, he was collectively like a very, very good player. So, but I think time will help him out. He's just objectively one of the best players on the ballot. So seeing him get an increase, especially considering last year was his first year, I feel like that would make a decent amount of sense.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, going back to the whole changing people's minds thing, Scott Rowland debuted at 10.2% on his first ballot. And granted, he debuted on a stacked ballot. I think it was the year that Mariano Rivera and Roy Halladay were first years, plus Bonds Clemens, Edgar Martinez was still on it, Mike Justino was still on it. And, he got about 2/3 of the writers to change their minds on him over the years. And Carlos Beltran has not years to change them to account for first-year voters. It doesn't account for anonymous voters. So I mean, I think 46.5% is a really good place to debut for Carlos Beltran. You know, pending anything else coming out about the Astros scandal, and even then, I think it's not going to play that much of a factor. I think it's quite easily a matter of when, not if,
Yeah, right.
for his Hall of Fame case.
Yeah, yeah.
So my second Hall of Fame hot take for this year is that Gary Sheffield will be at 70% before the results are announced. So Gary Sheffield got 55% of the vote last year. Like I mentioned, that was a 15% gain from the previous year where he had 40.6%. And I think this year, it's obviously his last year on the ballot. He is the lone 10th year candidate on this year's ballot. And I think he's going to get a lot of support from people that haven't previously voted for him because I think a lot of writers tend to vote for guys on their 10th year just to say that they voted for him. Gary Sheffield's not making it to the Hall of Fame this year. I think that's a pretty clear statement, but I think he's going to do surprisingly well heading up to the election to the point where MLB Network's going to have to show Gary Sheffield highlights during their like pre-election show just, because there's an outside chance he gets in. Last year, he had 62.5% of the public vote that came out before the election. This year, I think he's going to gain enough support from guys that hadn't previously voted for him to get to 70. And I think obviously his percentage will fall off with the private ballots because those people tend to not like the guys with steroid suspicions, guys with confirmed steroid use, whatever it may be. I think he'll probably get around like high 50s to low 60s% of the vote this year, but I do think that he's going to be at a very high percent when the results are announced.
Yeah, and I think also another point with the private ballots is they just generally have smaller ballots. Like they don't. I just don't think they vote for as many people as the public ballots. So
Yeah.
like that'll obviously hurt him with the voting. But excuse me. But yeah, Sheffield. He's had a very interesting case. He was tied up with a steroid case in like 2003, but he wasn't like the poster child of PEDs necessarily. So his case isn't exactly as well known. But a guy in the 500 home run club, a guy who had a career OPS over 900, played with many teams, made an impact with many teams. So yeah, I think it would be like it would make sense they got similar notoriety on that 10th ballot, because obviously the 10th ballot, guys just see an odd increase. I think we saw that with Jeff Kent last year. We saw that with Fred McGriff. So that just tends to happen. So it would be cool to see him get close to 60% of the vote this year. What is the third hot take?
So my third hot take, this is definitely the riskiest one because it could blow up at any point in the next 2 months. But I think, and I'm putting a lot of faith in the BBWAA with this one, but I think Adrian Beltre will be unanimous before the results are announced. I think he will be on every single ballot that comes out before the election. There's usually about 200 of them. I think he will be on all of them. It takes one person to screw up that take. It hasn't happened yet, because that would be really embarrassing if it did. But Adrian Beltre has the clearest Hall of Fame case for anyone we've seen since at least Derek Jeter, and I think there's a case you could even go beyond that. I think, he's a guy that appeals to all subgenres of voters, whether you're an old school voter, a new school voter. There's really not much that isn't to like about Adrian Beltre. He's a guy with over 3,000 career hits. He's a guy with 477 career home runs. He's a guy with 90 B WAR and F WAR. He's a top 5 player all time at his position. He was also tremendous at defense. I mean, that's why his WAR is so high. I think he's second in fielding runs all time behind just Brooks Robinson, which is a pretty good person to be the only person you're trailing. Yeah, I don't see, I think it's so hard to find a reason to vote against him. I think the only thing you could maybe say if you're really that desperate is like he never won a World Series, even though he got pretty much as close as you possibly can without actually winning one. It's also not even like it was his fault. None of that was. He had a pretty good OPS in that World Series and in that postseason in general. But yeah, I think Adrian Beltre will be on every ballot before the results are announced. I don't think I can confidently say he'll be unanimous. Period. Um, because you never really can know. But I do think all the people that make their ballots known will have Adrian Beltre on them.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's hard to be unanimous from everyone. Even the great Derek Jeter was unable to be unanimous, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, yeah, he checks off all the boxes. No ties to PEDs. He had the longevity. He had peaks. You could argue like multiple peaks. But just looking at numbers like 2010 to 2014, he averaged 6.5 WAR per season. That's pretty great. And that's not even including his best season of his career, where he had 9.6 PWAR. And then, yeah, 5 Gold Gloves, was always a very, very good bat. Over 3,000 hits. There's no non-steroid affiliated person with 3,000 hits that's
Didn't
not in
he?
the Hall
Yeah,
of
didn't he
Fame.
finish runner up to Barry Bonds in MVP once?
Back in '04, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he finished second that year, right? Yeah, second. Yeah, I mean, he would have won a Gold Glove or would have won an MVP if Barry Bonds didn't exist,
Barry Bonds didn't walk
which is very good.
232 times that one year. Um, but
Yeah, if he didn't have a 1400, if he didn't have a 1422 OPS.
yeah, Beltray might have had a shot. But yeah, so I think there's definitely reason to believe with that. But people have their biases, so we will see for sure. What is your fourth hot take?
Yeah, it's so hard to predict because that one could fall apart at any moment. This one is a kind of a different direction, but I think Torrey Hunter is going to fall off the ballot this year. Torrey Hunter is in his fourth year on the BBWA ballot, and he debuted at 9.5% in 2020. And all he's done since then is go down. In 2022, which was the year that David Ortiz was added, that was a really tough year for Gaines in general because nobody fell off the ballot, whether it be through getting in or maxing out on ballots. And Torrey Hunter went down to 5.9%, I think. Like he just barely stayed on. And last year, and a huge year for Gaines, he only went up to 6.9%, which is, I think, not enough. For a year where so many people saw a lot of gains, Torrey Hunter just did not see them. And like I've mentioned, I don't think this will be a good year for Gaines, and I think Torrey Hunter will lose a few votes to people choosing to vote for some first years over him. And ultimately, I think he's going to fall off the ballot this year.
Yeah, it would make sense. It has not been, this ballot is not going to be as friendly to returners as it was last year. Last year was the ultimate year of gains. If you want to put it like that, for everybody it seemed. But obviously Torrey Hunter sort of missed out on that, unfortunately for him. And it makes a little bit of sense. He just no matter what metric you look at necessarily outside of Gold Gloves, he was a very good player, but not necessarily one of the elites. I think the only argument you could really have for him is the fact that he won 9 Gold Gloves and was an above average bat for his career. But I think the validity of those Gold Gloves is being put into question, and that's being reflected by the voters. So yeah, there's definitely reason to believe with these 3 major guys coming in, and I feel like people who voted for Hunter had pretty big ballots already, and that was maybe their 9th or 10th option was putting Hunter on the ballot. That'll hurt him a little bit.
Yeah. And my last Hall of Fame hot take, Chase Utley and Joe Mauer, who are both first-year candidates, will both debut above 45%. Like I mentioned with Beltran, that is more than halfway to 75. I've actually changed my my kind of thoughts on Mauer over the last year. Because one of my hot takes from after the election last year was that I think Mauer will get like 60 to 70, maybe even 75%. What I really wasn't accounting for was the discourse around him as a career catcher, because Joe Mauer played exactly 49.5% of his games in his total career as a catcher, and he shifted to first base. And it sounds like a lot of people are kind of turned off by that, and I really wasn't accounting for that. But I do think he'll still be a Hall of Famer one day, and I think he'll do very well on this ballot and look very encouraging. Um, Chase Utley, I think, could surprise a lot of people. I mean, it's obviously only been 8 ballots that are out so far, but he and Mauer are both at 62.5%. They've been on 5 out of 8 ballots so far, um, which is certainly very good. And obviously, that's only 2% of the known, the total ballots. So you can't really make any real judgments off of that. But there's a lot of discourse over Chase Utley. He's a guy that doesn't necessarily have a lot of the count stats, but certainly has the rate stats. And as a second baseman, really redefined what that position is during an era where he was kind of there with two other really good second basemen at the time, with him, Dustin Pedroia, and Ian Kinsler, and he kind of ended up having the best career out of those three. So I think it's very possible that Chase Utley does very well. I think Joe Mauer also gets over 45. I think both of them get 45% this year, and it becomes a matter of when, not if, for their Hall of Fame inductions.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And regarding both those players, I feel like also there's a little bit of their like spotlight factor. I feel like when you think of late 2000s baseball, those two are coming up to mind pretty quickly. Like Joe Mauer was one of the staple catchers of that generation, and Chase Utley was one of the staple second basemen of that generation, and a leader on a profound leader on one of the more successful teams of the late 2000s and early 2010s with the Phillies. So yeah, like there is that sort of factor there. Yeah, I'm hoping that they can have some significance on this ballot. I'm not quite sure where they'll land, but if they end up 45 or higher first ballot, that should be a good sign. So yeah, we'll see what the voters do. If they disappoint us, if they reward our faith, who knows? But yeah, should be very interesting.
I'll give a bonus hot take real quick. I didn't write this one down, but I definitely have wanted to say this. As much as I don't want to be saying this, I don't know if Billy Wagner is going to be the lock that we see him as right now, because he has to gain 7% of the vote after gaining 17% last year, which theoretically should be no problem. But like I said, it's not going to be a good year for gains, and I feel like it's going to be a lot closer than we think. I do think he'll make it this year. I don't think it's 100% chance. I'd give it like an 85 to 90% chance.
Yeah, right. That last percentage that you need always seems to be the steepest climb for a lot of these players.
Yeah, it's because there's fewer voters that you have to change the minds of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do think he'll get there though, but I think it'll be pretty close.
Yeah,
and even if he doesn't make it this year, he'll make it next year in his 10th year.
Personally, I hope the Miller School of Albemarle head baseball coach makes it in. Shout out to the Charlottesville
Same.
area.
I hope Cape Cod Baseball League. Yeah, I hope the Cape Cod Baseball League Hall of Fame class of 2022 inductee gets in.
Yeah, he fills both of our niches, Central Virginia and the Cape Cod Baseball League.
He does.
So yeah,
Yep.
just very, very funny. But yeah, there's other Hall of Fame happenings going on, which I'm sure, Daniel, you're very excited about. However, there's not really any players to talk about, which is unfortunate. We don't really have much to analyze. I mean, what are you thinking about this new era ballot that we have going on? What's it called again?
Yeah. They change. It's different every year. It's tough. What's the era? Temporary baseball era committee for managers, executives, and umpires. So
Yeah,
it's the same name. It's just They're changing up the. Okay. So it's I don't know. I feel like there's no one to really get like passionate about on this ballot because there's no statistics to go along with them. It's literally just more based on feel than anything else. Um, I guess we could kind of briefly go over the four managers that are on this ballot. So it is Cito Gaston, who is most remembered for managing the Blue Jays during their two World Series seasons in 1992 and 93. He managed them for 12 years, from 1989 through 97, and then 2008 through 10. He won obviously two pennants and two World Series in back-to-back years with them. In total, managed them to a 516 winning percentage in over 1,700 games. There is Jim Leland, who famously managed Team USA Baseball in the 2017 World Baseball Classic, but also managed the Florida Marlins, Pittsburgh Pirates, Colorado Rockies very briefly, and the Detroit Tigers. In total, he managed almost 3,500 games. He was literally one off, and he's 1769 and 1728 record. He won three pennants, one with the Marlins and two with the Tigers, and then also a World Series with the Marlins in 1997. He also was as close as you can possibly get to getting the Pirates to the World Series in 1992. He got them to the playoffs in 1990, 1991, and 92, I believe. Right? They were there in 91
Who the
against the Braves. They were.
the Twins?
The Pirates.
Oh,
No,
the
the Pirates against the Braves in the NLCS. They did get there, though.
Yeah, they definitely got there.
I think Jim Leland, out of all the managers, probably has the strongest case, but we get into that later.
Yeah.
Davey Johnson, who managed the only team that I remember him for is the Nationals, which is kind of embarrassing, but he managed the Mets, the Reds, the Orioles, the Dodgers, and the Nationals. He managed from ages 41 through 70, which is pretty crazy. He won a World Series with the Mets in 1986. He also managed them to really like some of the best years that the franchise has ever had. A 90-win season in 1984, 98 wins in 85, 108 wins in 86, 92 and 87, 100 in 88, 87 wins in 1989. Yeah, I mean, kind of the golden age of Mets baseball was headed by Davey Johnson in the mid 80s. He also managed the Orioles to a 98 win season, a wire-to-wire season in 1997. They led the division literally every day. And then also the 2012 Nationals, he managed to 98 wins. That was the year I guess he's kind of responsible for shutting Steven Strasburg down. Maybe that's his legacy there. That may have been more of a front office move than a managerial move, but that also happened there.
Yep.
And then the last manager is who's the last manager? Lou Piniella. Yeah, Lou Piniella, who managed the Reds, the Mariners, the Rays. And I don't know if that's it or not. He managed the Yankees as well. Managed the Cubs. Won a World Series with the Reds. Brought the Mariners to the postseason for the first time in franchise history. Gave them the 116 win season. He also is a guy that has a very strong chance as a manager. He has a 517 winning percentage career, which is very good over that span.
Yeah, for sure. Regarding managers in Hall of Fame, it's bringing me flashbacks to talking about manager of the year and reminding me like, oh God, we're evaluating managers like we don't really know what's going on here, and especially like considering much of these guys' careers happened before we were really baseball fans, and we don't really know like what were the expectations of these teams, like were these teams trading a bunch of players but they were still doing really well, or did this team only succeed because their front office really invested? So it puts us behind the eight ball to sort of evaluate these guys. But if you're managing a team to a World Series, I feel like there's definitely some substance there. So shout out to Davey Johnson, Lou Piniella, and Cito Gaston in that respect. Cito Gaston did it twice, back-to-back years. So there's some substance to that. But, and especially we didn't see those guys make the game-by-game decisions and what their everyday lineups look like and if that was the right decision. So, it does put us behind the 8 ball, whereas, us two can evaluate Bill Dolan's career before 1900 based off the numbers that we have. But, with managers, it's a little more hard to judge.
It is. It's very weird.
Yeah.
So umpires, there are two. Joe West is one of them. Joe West is a man that needs no introduction. If you know, if you know, you know, he has umpired more Major League Baseball games, I believe, in history than any other umpire. Weirdly enough, I think overall he might have the best chance to get in, just because I feel like he just stood out more in his job than anyone else. Maybe that's a good thing as an umpire. Maybe it's a bad thing. I don't know. But I feel like, and I feel like absolutely zero pitchers will vote for Joe West.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they do announce who is voting in these in these uh, in these elections. The other umpire is Ed Montague, who I'm trying to look at information for.
Yeah.
All right.
This is even
Ed
harder.
Montague spent 35 seasons as a Major League umpire, retiring in 2010. I mean, 35 years is a long time.
Yeah, it is a long time. You talk about longevity.
Yeah. And then the other two are Hank Peters, who is an executive. He was a GM of the A's, the Kansas City A's in 1965. He was the Baltimore Orioles GM from 1976 to 87. He was the Cleveland then Indians general manager from 1988 to 91. Which probably means that he built a lot of the dominant Cleveland teams in the 90s, or had some part of that.
Right. This is, in my opinion, this is where the idea of players or managers and executives voting makes the most sense, because they're really the only people
Absolutely.
that can evaluate this. I can look at for a player, I can look at a Baseball Reference page or a Fangraphs page all day to see where they matched up statistically. But
yeah, whenever we will have better analysis, I promise, after after this is over and people are in. But there's just not a lot to say right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other executive is Bill White, who a lot of people have had things to say about. Brian Kenny on MLB Now said that he thinks Bill White is the most deserving candidate. He was a player for actually kind of a while, not necessarily a Hall of Fame player. He had 202 career home runs, which is pretty cool. But he was an executive and a pioneer. I think that's how he is on as a pioneer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? It looks like this voting committee is mostly historians and like writers, and not many players, which I guess makes sense.
Well, at least you have the history aspect.
Bill White. Bill White served as a president of the National League from 1989 to 94, following a successful career as a player and broadcaster. An 8-time All-Star and 7-time Gold Glove Award-winning first baseman, White presided over the addition of the Marlins and the Rockies to the NL and helped consolidate both the American and National Leagues under one administrative umbrella. That's a heck of a bio.
Yeah, it's a good LinkedIn resume
on the Baseball Hall of Fame website. Yeah, very good LinkedIn resume.
Yeah, we love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I promise we will have better analysis on this on the next show.
Yeah. Well, like,
I don't know. It's very interesting because the way that these ballots work is that guys can only vote for up to three people. So I feel like maybe there's just so much variety in all the ballots that maybe no one gets to 75.
Yeah, that's what kind of messed it up for the last one that they did, because Fred McGriff got all 16, but everybody else just did not get votes because they were all being dispersed around by everybody because you could only get 3. So
Also, I'm pretty sure
yeah.
Dale Murphy and Fred McGriff were both on that ballot, and I believe 2 of the voters were Greg Maddux and Chipper Jones, which is like, well, obviously they're going to vote for the Braves guys. One of them being their teammate.
Yeah.
It's like when Harold Baines got in, and like one of the voters was Jerry Reinsdorf. One of them was a teammate of his. One of them was like the GM who drafted him, Pat Gillick, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, and some of these ballots are a little sus with how they choose voters and who's on the ballot. I don't think this one probably will. I don't think this one will be.
Yeah, it seems like an odd enough cast of characters.
Yeah, it'll be interesting though.
Hard.
Yeah, honestly, like I always go into these elections like kind of nervous because the era committee ballots famously like put in some of the worst Hall of Famers, and they also miss on some of the most obvious people. Like they missed on Dick Allen in 2022, I believe. They missed on or 2021 into 2022. They missed on Lou Whitaker in 2019 going into 20. I don't think I have any reason to be nervous about this one. Like I don't think there's a single guy that I'm like they need to be in, but there's also not a big guy that I'm like they can't be in.
Exactly.
So yeah. So
exactly.
I'm just having fun on this one.
Yes, indeed. It's a wild card ballot. It's a wild card ballot. Any more thoughts before we wrap this show up?
Nope, no, nothing at all. I will say whoever gets in, we will hype them up next show. Like we will give them their flowers because we didn't do anyone justice on this show.
It's fair enough. I mean, I feel like hardly anyone knows a lot about.
I will at least.
Yeah.
I will give a 30-minute talk on Bill White.
Yes. We'll make a hype video.
Yeah.
It'll be like a college recruitment video for Bill White. All right. Well,
exactly.
That does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. It's been a little while. But if you want to follow us on social media, follow me at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran. Daniel was back in the Cape, and he talked with Billy Wagner, who you may be familiar with from the 2024 and many other Hall of Fame ballots. And talked about his Cape Cod journey.
You may know him from his many appearances
on the ballot.
You may know him from his many appearances on the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah. But yeah.
You might know him from his 11.9 career strikeouts per 9, his 3.99 strikeout to walk ratio, his 187 ERA plus.
Yep. His 422 career saves, I think.
Yes, that is exactly it. Yeah.
And his time on the Red Sox, where I actually saw him pitch at Fenway as a Red Sox player. I feel like not many people can say
Very
that.
Cool.
But anyway, follow Daniel. Go read his article.
Pretty much
on the Cape Cod League's website.
2009.
So yeah, and subscribe.
Also, there's quotes from Peter Gammons in there, Baseball Hall of Famer Peter Gammons.
Correct. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. Subscribe to the Apple Podcast and Spotify feeds, and yeah, show some love. And we hope you enjoy this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking about whoever was elected in this era ballot, and probably some more free agent deals and some trades. So we will see you then.
Winter meetings coming up.
Yeah.
This conversation is over.